The Great Depression, the story we were never taught. It began with a whisper. Not the sound of crashing banks or the cry of hungry crowds, just the faint, uneasy whisper of fear, echoing through the corridors of finance. In the autumn of 1929, New York's skyline shimmered with confidence. The Chrysler Building was nearing completion. The sound of construction filled the air. America was the land of endless promise. Skyscrapers were rising faster than ever before, radios were selling by the millions, and the stock market had become the new religion of wealth. But what you were taught in school, that the Great Depression was simply a stock market crash that led to hard times, barely scratches the surface of one of history's most devastating and transformative events. This is the story of the Great Depression you were never taught. The global catastrophe that reshaped civilization itself. The Roaring Twenties, a nation drunk on dreams. Men and women, from wealthy bankers to small-town clerks, poured their life savings into the market. Stocks were not just investments, they were dreams made tangible. A factory worker in Detroit could own a slice of General Motors. A teacher in Kansas could boast shares in U.S. Steel. A shopkeeper in Brooklyn could speculate on railroads and radio companies. Everyone believed that prices would rise forever. The market had climbed steadily since 1921. In just 4 years, from 1925 to 1929, stock values had doubled, then tripled. It seemed like magic, wealth appearing from thin air. But beneath the glamour of prosperity, something rotten was spreading: credit, speculation, and greed. The decade that danced on the edge. The 1920s were called the Roaring Twenties, and for good reason. It was a decade that danced to the rhythm of jazz and champagne. Henry Ford's assembly lines revolutionized manufacturing. Between 1920 and 1929, car production tripled. Radios brought the world into living rooms. By 1929, over 10 million households owned one. Electricity and modern appliances transformed daily life. Refrigerators, washing machines, vacuum cleaners. America seemed unstoppable. In the cities, fortunes were made overnight. Young brokers became millionaires. Bootleggers grew rich during Prohibition. Flappers danced in speakeasies. The wealthy built mansions on Long Island and summer homes in Newport. It was the age of Gatsby, where excess knew no bounds. The dark underbelly. Yet behind the laughter of the rich was a growing silence from the poor. The wealth was not shared. While corporate profits soared by 62% during the 1920s, workers' wages rose only 8%. The richest 1% of Americans own nearly 40% of the nation's wealth. In rural America, the story was even darker. Farmers in the Midwest were drowning in debt. During World War I, they had expanded production to feed Europe. They bought tractors, took out loans, purchased more land. But when the war ended, European farmers returned to their fields. Demand collapsed. Prices plummeted. American farmers were left with equipment they couldn't pay for and crops they couldn't sell. Small banks, especially in rural areas, were stretched dangerously thin by risky loans. Between 1921 and 1929, over 5,000 small banks failed, a warning sign that almost everyone ignored. The House of Cards. Still, Wall Street roared on. Brokers offered easy credit in a practice called buying on margin. You could buy stocks with just 10% down, borrowing the rest. Imagine, $100 could control $1,000 worth of stock. If prices rose, you made 10 times your investment. It seemed foolproof. People mortgaged their homes. They borrowed from friends. They pawned family heirlooms. Everyone plunged into the market. Taxi drivers gave stock tips. Shoeshine boys discussed portfolio strategies. Comedians joked that you could make more money in the market than working. It was a house of cards built on confidence, and confidence is the easiest thing to lose. By September 1929, the stock market had reached impossible heights. The Dow Jones Industrial Average peaked at 381 points, a level it wouldn't reach again until 1954. Warning signs emerged. Production began to slow. Car sales dropped. Construction declined. But the market kept climbing, fueled purely by speculation and borrowed money. The whisper of fear was about to become a scream. Black Thursday, the beginning of the end. October 24, 1929, Black Thursday. The day started like any other. Brokers arrived at the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street. The opening bell rang at 10 a.m. But within minutes, something felt wrong. Sell orders flooded in. More selling. Then panic selling. By mid-morning, panic spread through the trading floor like wildfire. Prices began to fall, not gradually, but in cascading waves. Margin calls went out. brokers demanding that investors pay back their loans immediately. But investors couldn't pay. They had borrowed everything. Their only option was to sell their stocks, which pushed prices down further, triggering more margin calls, forcing more selling. It was a death spiral. Within hours, billions of dollars in paper wealth vanished into thin air. Men stood in silence as ticker machines, overwhelmed by the volume of trades, fell hours behind. They didn't even know how much they had lost. Some fainted. Others wept openly on the trading floor. Grown men, wealthy just hours before, stumbled out of the building in shock. The myth of endless prosperity shattered in a single day. The banker's last stand. At noon, a group of powerful bankers gathered at the offices of J.P. Morgan. They pooled their resources, hundreds of millions of dollars, and marched to the stock exchange. Their message was clear: they would buy stocks to stabilize prices. For a few hours, it worked. The market steadied. Panic eased. Friday was quiet. Saturday and Sunday, people tried to convince themselves it was over, just a correction, a temporary setback. They were wrong. Black Tuesday, total collapse. October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday. The market opened to chaos. Everyone was selling. No one was buying. The bankers' plan had failed. There wasn't enough money in the world to stop what was happening. The market collapsed under its own weight. 16 million shares were traded, a record that wouldn't be broken for nearly 40 years. The Dow Jones fell 12% in a single day. Fortunes accumulated over decades disappeared in hours. Banks called in loans that borrowers couldn't repay. When borrowers defaulted, banks failed. When banks failed, depositors lost everything. There was no insurance, no safety net. Your life savings could vanish overnight. The domino effect. As banks collapsed, they stopped lending. Without loans, factories couldn't buy materials. Without materials, factories shut down. Without factories, workers lost jobs. Without jobs, people couldn't pay rent or buy food. Landlords couldn't pay mortgages. More banks failed. By 1930, factories across America were silent. Assembly lines stopped. Smokestacks went cold. In cities like Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, unemployment reached 50%. Men who had built cars or forged steel now stood in breadlines. Families lost homes. Middle-class neighborhoods became wastelands of foreclosed houses. Children dropped out of school to search for work that didn't exist. The American dream had become a nightmare, the spark that ignited the world. But what most people were never taught is that this wasn't just America's tragedy. The crash was the spark that ignited a global inferno. By 1929, America had become the world's banker. After World War I, European nations owed the United States billions in war debts. American banks had loaned money to Germany to pay reparations to Britain and France. Britain and France used those reparations to pay back America. It was a circular flow of money, and when American banks collapsed, the entire system seized up. Britain, the fall of an empire. In London, the heart of world finance, the Bank of England struggled to contain panic. British investors had poured fortunes into American stocks, and now they were ruined. British exports collapsed as global trade froze. The pound sterling, once the world's dominant currency, weakened. Unemployment in Britain reached 20%. In industrial cities like Manchester and Glasgow, entire communities faced destitution. The British Empire, already weakened by the Great War, would never recover its former glory. Germany, fertile ground for fascism. In Germany, the impact was catastrophic. The Weimar Republic, already reeling from World War I reparations and hyperinflation in the early 1920s, found its fragile economy crushed. American banks had been propping up the German economy with loans. When those loans were called in, German banks failed. Factories closed overnight. Unemployment soared to 30%, over 6 million Germans were jobless. Desperation spread like a fever. People lost faith in democracy. They wanted someone strong, someone who promised simple solutions to complex problems. In beer halls and street corners, a former soldier named Adolf Hitler found eager audiences. His message was clear: Germany's suffering was caused by traitors, by scapegoats, by external enemies. He promised revenge, order, and national pride. By 1933, Hitler would be chancellor. The Great Depression didn't just destroy the German economy, it destroyed German democracy and paved the road to World War II. Japan, the path to militarism. In Japan, exports collapsed as demand for silk and goods disappeared. Japanese silk, once in high demand for American stockings and luxury goods, found no buyers. The textile industry crumbled. Farmers faced starvation as rice prices plummeted. In the countryside, some families sold their daughters to brothels to survive. The government seemed powerless to help. The military, however, had a solution: expansion. They promised that conquering new territories, China, Southeast Asia, would provide resources and markets. By the early 1930s, the military had seized control of the government. Japan's path to Pearl Harbor began in the breadlines of the Depression. India, China, Latin America, the forgotten victims. In India, then under British colonial rule, the Depression was equally devastating. Farmers who had been pushed into cash crops like cotton and jute suddenly found no buyers. Prices collapsed by 50% or more. But colonial authorities still demanded taxes in cash. Farmers who couldn't pay lost their land. Millions faced hunger. The Depression accelerated India's independence movement. People questioned why they should suffer for an economic system designed in London and New York. In China, already destabilized by civil war, the Depression deepened chaos. In Latin America, countries dependent on exporting coffee, rubber, and minerals saw their economies collapse. Governments fell. Revolutions erupted. The death of global trade. Trade routes dried up. Currencies devalued. Governments turned inward, imposing tariffs to protect their economies, but those same walls strangled global commerce. The United States passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930, raising import duties to record levels. Other nations retaliated with their own tariffs. International trade contracted by over 65% between 1929 and 1932. By 1931, what had begun as a stock market collapse in New York became the Great Depression of the world. It was the first truly global economic crisis, proof that modern economies were interconnected in ways no one had fully understood. Beyond the numbers. This is the part history books often skip. The Great Depression wasn't just about numbers, it was about people. In America, bread lines stretched for miles in every major city. Soup kitchens served thousands daily. Men stood in line for hours, heads bowed, to receive a bowl of thin soup and a piece of bread. Fathers walked the streets, ashamed to go home empty-handed. Many would leave at dawn, pretending to search for work, and return at dusk so their families wouldn't know they'd been sitting on park benches all day. The psychological toll was immense. Suicide rates soared. Children scavenged through garbage bins for food. Teachers noticed students fainting from hunger. Some schools started lunch programs, but many children were too proud to accept charity. They said they weren't hungry while their stomachs cramped with emptiness. The Dust Bowl, nature's cruel addition. In the Great Plains states, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Colorado, the Depression combined with environmental catastrophe. Years of overfarming and drought turned farms to wastelands. The topsoil, stripped of native grasses that had held it in place for millennia, simply blew away. Winds carried dust clouds thousands of feet high, black blizzards that turned day to night. People stuffed rags under doors and windows, but dust seeped through. They ate it, breathed it, wore it. On April 14, 1935, Black Sunday, the worst dust storm in history struck. A wall of dust 2 miles high rolled across the plains at 60 miles per hour. Animals died. People suffocated. The land itself seemed to be dying. Entire families packed their lives into trucks and drove west, hoping California might offer work. They were called Okies, a term of contempt. They lived in roadside camps. They picked crops for pennies. They were America's refugees, fleeing not war but economic collapse and ecological disaster. The Depression's global face. In Europe, the stories were similar. In Vienna, intellectuals sold their books for food. In Berlin, children played with stacks of worthless currency. In London, the unemployed marched, demanding work or bread. In Australia, 1 in 3 workers was unemployed. In Canada, young men rode freight trains searching for jobs, becoming known as hobos. Some froze to death in winters. Others were arrested as vagrants. The Depression destroyed more than economies, it destroyed dignity, hope, and faith in the future. The rise of dictators. Europe's suffering became fertile ground for extremism. Italy's Mussolini tightened his grip, promising order through fascism. Stalin's Soviet Union, insulated by its communist system, used the Depression as propaganda. See? Capitalism has failed. Spain descended into civil war. Across Europe and Asia, democracy retreated as strongmen advanced. The Great Depression didn't just destroy banks. It destroyed faith in democracy, in capitalism, in fairness itself. It showed that economic collapse doesn't just cause poverty, it causes political chaos, extremism, and eventually, war. The world hits bottom. By 1932, the world's financial system had collapsed. International loans froze. Nations went bankrupt. The global economy had become a ghost town. America's GDP fell by nearly half from its 1929 peak. Unemployment reached 25%. 1 in 4 workers had no job. In some industrial towns, it was over 60%. Over 10,000 banks had failed, taking people's savings with them. But beyond the statistics, the pain was human. People trading apples for bread, neighbors helping neighbors survive one day at a time, communities creating their own currencies when official money disappeared. Questions that changed everything. And yet, something profound began to change. People started asking dangerous questions. Who controls this system? Why can paper wealth vanish while real people starve? Why should workers suffer for mistakes made by bankers? It was the first time ordinary citizens questioned the invisible architecture of money. Protests erupted. Labor unions grew. In 1932, thousands of World War I veterans marched on Washington demanding their bonuses. The army drove them out with tanks and tear gas, but the message was clear: people were done suffering in silence. Roosevelt and the New Deal. You were probably taught that the Great Depression ended because of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. That's partly true, but not the whole story. Roosevelt was elected in 1932 with a simple promise: a new deal for the American people. When he took office in March 1933, he moved fast. In his first 100 days, he passed more legislation than most presidents pass in 4 years. He closed banks temporarily and reopened only those that were sound. He created the FDIC to ensure deposits, so people would never lose their savings to bank failures again. He established Social Security to protect the elderly. He created jobs programs, the CCC, WPA, TVA, putting millions to work building roads, bridges, dams, and parks. He regulated Wall Street, separating commercial banking from investment banking. He gave workers the right to unionize. He ended prohibition. He spoke to Americans through radio fireside chats, restoring confidence through honest communication. The New Deal helped stabilize America. Confidence slowly returned. But it didn't end the Depression. Unemployment remained high through the 1930s. Full recovery wouldn't come until 1941. The war economy. Globally, the Depression didn't truly end until the Second World War, when massive government spending on weapons and infrastructure reignited industry. Factories that had been silent for a decade roared back to life, producing tanks, planes, and ships. Unemployment vanished overnight as millions entered the military or took factory jobs. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. It was war, not peace, that finally cured the world's economy. And that's the hidden lesson. Our financial system was built fragile by design, dependent on credit, speculation, and the illusion of endless growth. Only massive government intervention, first through the New Deal, then through war spending, could restart it. What we were never taught. You were taught that the Great Depression was a market failure. But it was more than that, it was a systemic collapse of trust. You were taught that it began in 1929. But its roots stretched back decades, to World War I debts, uneven wealth distribution, and unregulated financial greed. You were taught that it was solved by brilliant policy. But in truth, it was human resilience, farmers, workers, and families refusing to give up, that pulled the world through. The world rebuilt. And most of all, you were never taught that the Depression's aftershocks shaped everything that came after. By 1944, as World War II drew to a close, global leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There, they designed a new system to prevent another depression. The US dollar would become the world's reserve currency, tied to gold. Other currencies would be linked to it. They created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. They established rules for international trade. It was meant to bring stability, and for a time, it did. But it also concentrated immense power in the hands of a few, especially the United States and its banks. The Depression had taught one clear lesson: whoever controls money, controls the future. From that moment on, the world's economy would revolve around the dollar, and Wall Street would once again rise, stronger than ever. The ghosts still whisper. Nearly a century later, the ghosts of the Great Depression still whisper through our world. In every market crash, every financial crisis, every government bailout, their echoes return. The subprime mortgage collapse of 2008. The European debt crises. The pandemic recession. Each time, we are reminded that the same forces, greed, speculation, and inequality, still shape the system. And each time, new generations ask the same question: how can we stop history from repeating itself? The mirror. Perhaps that's the greatest truth we were never taught, that the Great Depression wasn't a one-time event. It was a warning. Look beyond the graphs and textbooks. See the faces of the men who lost their homes, the mothers who stood in breadlines, the children who grew up believing the world had forgotten them. Their struggle built the systems we live in today, from social safety nets to global trade institutions. They taught the world that economics isn't just about profit and loss, it's about survival, dignity, and hope. The real wealth. The Great Depression wasn't just a collapse of money. It was a collapse of illusion, and a rebirth of humanity. If history teaches anything, it's this: every empire built on unchecked wealth eventually falls. Every system driven by greed will meet its reckoning. And every crisis, no matter how devastating, carries within it the seeds of renewal. The Great Depression changed how we think about money, work, and responsibility. It taught nations to protect their people, and people to question their leaders. But perhaps the most important lesson is the simplest: the economy isn't an invisible force. It's us, our choices, our fears, our hopes. When we remember that, we take back control of the story. The Great Depression you were never taught about isn't just history, it's a mirror. It shows us what happens when the pursuit of profit overshadows humanity. It reminds us that numbers on paper can vanish overnight, but compassion, community, and courage, those are the real wealth that endure. Because the greatest riches aren't stored in banks. They're stored in the hearts of people who refuse to give up. And that is the story of the Great Depression, not as a lesson in economics, but as a lesson in what it means to be human.